Good evening. My name is Tom Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of KyotoUSA, a local Berkeley-based nonprofit organization that works on climate change. And tonight we're here talking about community choice energy. And I have with me Al Weinrub from the local Clean Energy Alliance and Rafael Silberblatt from the Marin Clean Energy Community Choice Energy Organization. And just Al, can you give us 2 sentences on what you're doing for LCEA, please?
The Local Clean Energy Alliance, well, we're just an organization in town that is trying to promote the development of local energy resources to benefit the community. We have this book called Community Power that's all about decentralized renewable energy in California, which what local clean energy is all about.
Great, and you can get that online, I'll bet, at LCEA.
Yeah, you can go to localcleanenergy.org and you'll find it right there on the homepage.
Rafael.
I am the program coordinator for Marin Clean Energy. We are right now the lone operating community choice aggregator or energy provider in the state of California. We offer 50% renewable electricity product as our default electricity product. Right now we're operating in all the cities and towns in Marin, and we'll be rolling out to the city of Richmond in July.
We're going to be talking at the in the Local Clean Energy Alliance about maybe trying to provide a venue which people can come together and try to discuss some of the thorny issues. You know, because we have our annual Clean Power Healthy Communities Conference, which always has a community choice component to it, also feed-in tariffs and, you know, other stuff. So we might be in the best position to, you know, to provide that.
I think there's some place where electeds could come, you know, and gather with their peers and actually talk to some, you know, to Sonoma.
Well, we can do that. We can do that in the East Bay. I mean, just as a kind of project that Chris Worthington was talking about, you know, to see if we can work with Lean and with whoever, I mean, maybe a couple of the city council people in Berkeley and a couple in Oakland and the Berkeley working group and the Oakland working group, and put together a program that maybe invites some of the, I mean, we don't have Charles McLashan anymore, but somebody like Efren, you know, Efren up in Sonoma, I forget his last name. He's a big advocate, you know, and speaks very well. And somebody like David Campos from San Francisco.
Don is great on this, you know.
Yeah, Don, who's an, you know. So, but I mean, there's people around that layer of folks would probably have some interest in hearing. You know, I just, you know, so long as the advocates are part of that effort, I mean, I think it would be great to do that, so that, you know, it's sort of a bringing together the different flavors of it. I mean, I think what I find more problematic is when people try to organize these high-level meetings of all the cities and stuff like that, and they don't bring the advocates into the picture. But in terms of the Oakland campaign, I mean, what we've been talking quite a bit about is, you know, we bring a lot of organizations together around advocating for the establishment of a program, and we see that basically as a stakeholder group that really represents the community, because it's all organizations that are based in the communities representing different sectors and whatnot. And we actually see that being a formalized body at some point, and it becomes an actual part of the governance structure of the CCA, where the CCA actually provides enough resources to hold that group together and to do that, so that it's not just, you know, here's the city council or here's the board of the CCA or whatever it is, but then there's an actual established entity that directly represents the community that's built into the mix.
I love that. I mean, you know, my grad program was all about participatory process and, you know, democratic planning and whatnot. So, I mean, that appeals to me, you know, just personally, and I feel like it's something I've tried to build in Marin, and in Richmond, I think we're you know, getting in early enough that I'm hoping that we can kind of do more around that. So we're going to have like an advisory committee to be able to go to for, you know, with questions and ideas, and that will hopefully direct us. And we're developing that kind of stakeholder group right now. But yeah, to have the public not just talk during public open time and send us emails, but to
Actually
have a spot at the table. Yeah.
So I mean, in Oakland, we're actually, strongly cultivating that idea. We've just come up with a 1-year plan, for building the campaign and doing outreach and trying to build that community support, with the idea that at a certain point in time, which hopefully will be coordinated across the East Bay with Berkeley and other places, to actually have a proposition to put before City Council, which will probably have some expenditure piece attached to it. So I don't know exactly what that would be yet, but my guess, what I would advocate for is that we actually try to write an RFP, that the advocates write an RFP for the kind of, for somebody to develop the business plan that would deliver the objectives that we're looking for, right? So it would cost some money to hire somebody to do that, but that we would sort of formulate an RFP, and then we would take that to the different city councils, and we would say, we want you to come up with some of the money toward that study. Or we could come up with something to take the city councils that would be like a memorandum of understanding that has something to do with the formation of a JPA down the road or whatnot. But in the process of doing that, what we want to do first is to build this stakeholder alliance, essentially, first. And then that's the body that's actually going to the city council and saying, this is what we want you to do. We represent the community, you do this. And when you do this, we're basically giving you the RFP that we would like you to issue, and we want to be part of the process of evaluating who the contractors will be. So that so that alliance is in there at every stage in a very formalized fashion. And I know that that's not the standard.
I think it's beyond it not being the standard. I just think once you start getting, JPA of 5 cities,
how does that work?
I mean, that's just going to be it's going to be difficult. More power to you if you can make it happen.
Well, I think it's going to be difficult. I think it is going to be difficult, but in a sense, to have community choice without that community there,
you're missing an opportunity.
It's missing sort of the point. So I think that's, among all the other challenges, that's part of the challenge. But you talked about doing real community outreach in Berkeley, and we've talked about that, and I think that's a major ingredient of being able to do that, to get people involved and at the level that they understand what's going on and they take a role. And then there will be organizations that see that they have more of a stake in this, where it's going, and they'll come forward, and we need to educate and cultivate and try to build that.
So one of the things that I was before my time, but before Marin Clean Energy was an agency, they did a survey in Marin to gauge public opinion, and that has been something that they were able to go to informing the agency to talk about, okay, well, what is the price point, what percent renewable, and what is the price point that people are willing to pay, and all that. And I feel like short of doing that in the East Bay, you're standing on kind of shaky ground to say this is okay, community choice is going to represent the community, but we haven't actually polled the community to find out what the community believes in. It's a little putting the cart before the horse.
It is, except that if you have all these organizations that are representative of the community, then they're tied in. Like all the organizations, the 17 that basically signed on to our letter to East Bay Mud, they do represent major segments of the community. Now, they don't include the labor folks yet, and there's some pieces that are definitely missing. But the notion is that if you have a legitimate stakeholder alliance, that alliance is going to be representative.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean that you wouldn't, do a survey, but the survey would, in my mind, wouldn't say, what are the portfolios and the price points? The survey would say something like, what are the factors that would be important to you in terms of competing with PG&E? Right. So those factors would include all these other kinds of benefits that we're talking about.
And all that was included in the survey. And I guess I'm just saying, short of the survey, your stakeholder group, it puts all the onus on who is in that stakeholder group. If you're going to say that's representative of all of our member jurisdictions, then that better be, you know,
true.
Yeah, that better be a bulletproof stakeholder group.
Well, it's got to be true because because you're staking the viability of the program on that. So I mean, I'm with you all the way. I mean, you do not want to start a program that you don't have confidence is going to be very popular.
And I just think that, you know, if you're talking about then, you know, having a program that's both in Berkeley, Oakland, and then over the hill in Walnut Creek, you've got some pretty disparate interests then in that stakeholder group.
Yeah, well, right now we're not talking about over the creek,
right?
But because of the differences in those communities. So I mean, I think definitely it's a concern. But like the thing about surveys that's also problematic is, like in San Francisco, they're doing these surveys to try to determine the price points, and the problem is that people always say things in survey.
Right. That's way over.
That they don't really do, right? So you say, oh yeah, I'd be willing to spend
$50 more,
whatever it is, right, to get deep green, right? And then what happens is, then you roll the thing out, and then you have the PG&E attack, you know, attack flack and whatnot, and all the stuff that on the survey just doesn't end up being real.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a notion in which the community organizations actually have, you know, a much stronger grip on reality than just a survey does. So I think it's sort of a difficult problem. But I mean, so we have to discuss all these things.
Right.
A survey without that stakeholder group doesn't mean anything. The stakeholder group that's out of touch with reality doesn't mean anything. And the real sense is to be able to quantify in some way, you know, what the real benefits are going to be for that community.
Yeah.
You know, and it's tricky.
But you know, I want to, if I can, just mention, you know, sometimes people raise these questions about PG&E, you know, and some people will characterize them in one way and others in another way, you know, and sometimes it's hard to know on the issue of community choice how much influence PG&E has in something. For example, in the earlier interview, you mentioned that PG&E brought out a lot of the chambers to advocate against community choice at the East Bay MUD meeting. And it was interesting. I've never seen so many chambers lined up saying the same thing in all my life. You know? But I mean, and so we can assume that that is something that PG&E orchestrated, that they just didn't find out about this on their own. But let me just say this, by law, PG&E isn't supposed to interfere with the development of a CCA. I mean, and so I hear these kinds of stories all the time, and you know, it's hard to know what to make of that. You know.
Yeah, well, there's a law and there's a law. But I mean, for sure, you know, in the case of PG&E's Everson Marin, they didn't follow the law, and in fact, the CPUC made it impossible in a sense because, you know, every time Marin said to the CPUC that these guys aren't following the law, they said, okay, we'll establish a hearing. And 9 months later, they did the hearing for 9 months, and then they came out and they said, well, you know, that's right, PG&E didn't do the right thing. Meanwhile, Marin, you know, the folks in Marin spent $300,000 on legal help to fight. You know what I mean? It was just a whole setup. So, you know, they have never followed the law. And under the code of conduct that they're establishing, they still won't follow the law, because all the code of conduct is going to end up saying is that they won't be able to use ratepayer funds to do this attack stuff. They'll have to use shareholder funds. Right. Well, you go figure that one out. I mean, that's just a joke. You know, so they're going to set up a whole new entity that's not whatever, and then they're going to use that entity to do this kind of stuff.
The other thing, Rafael, that I remember from one of the meetings you held at the Richmond City Council was this issue about if people drop out of, are no longer PG&E customers, they become a customer of a CCA, does that raise the rates for the PG&E customers that are still get their electricity delivered by PG&E? And I remember Dawn surprised me. She said that in fact PG&E rates had actually dropped at one point, you know, when it looked like Marin was actually going to come online with its CCA.
Yeah, I think that it was the first time in 13 years, I think, that PG&E had reduced its rates when basically when we came on the scene.
For all customers, for
all customers. Yeah. You know, we like to chalk that up to competition. It may have more to do with the price of natural gas being really low, or at the time. But you know, I try to shy away from denigrating PG&E, both because we're partners with them, so we try to be civil. You know, we're working with them on an energy efficiency program that should be really a great program and seamless to the customer, but we'll both be funding it and working together. So it's, you know, there's a lot of great people who work at PG&E.
As an agency, you can't do that, but from the advocate's point of view, there's just no question that every move you try to make, PG&E is right there to stick it to you. I mean, those chambers of commerce, you know, there's just absolutely no question of what's going on because PG&E owns those chambers of commerce. I mean, in some cases, they're PG&E people who are officers, you know, at the top of the chambers of commerces. They give them free electricity. I mean, it's like, you know, that's how they operate. That's how PG&E operates.
Well, and I was just going to say, it's interesting because a lot of the arguments that you would think would be successful with people, as far as, you know, government agencies being not-for-profit, and telling people, like, you realize that when you're paying your PG&E bill, a certain percentage of that is you're just paying profit to, you know, for the company. Like, you're just paying money into the shareholders' pockets. First of all, there's a lot of people who own stock in PG&E who are very happy with that model. But then also, you know, it doesn't kind of, for me, that's what's so appealing, you know, about community choice, is I feel like utilities should be not-for-profits. That makes sense to me. But that is not a nearly as compelling an argument as you know, you would think it would be. And so I kind of come back to is just the you know, the end of monopoly and local decision making, because it's very hard to reject either of those two arguments. You know, across the political spectrum, who likes monopoly? You know, that's as anti-American as you can get. So that's kind of, I stick to those, and it's you know, it's very hard for people to come back on those arguments.
Well, I just wanted to say again that this is the kind of thing that average people like us can do, you know, in terms of trying to convince our local governments to join or become part of a CCA that will reduce that carbon footprint or emissions that we as residents and businesses are responsible for. I mean, it's direct. I mean, it's not, you know, indirect
anybody
emissions.
else, right.
It's our emissions that we're actually improving. And so, you know, it's such in some ways, such an easy thing to do. Granted, a very complicated thing for those who have to engage in it, but I would certainly encourage residents of the city of Berkeley and the surrounding region to, you know, just learn a little bit more about CCA, so that they're not completely uneducated on this issue, so that they have some fluency with it, so that they're then able to call their local representatives and say, even, what are we doing on this? Is this something we should be exploring? You know, can you tell me what your position is on this, so that we can begin to build a little bit more advocacy, you know, interest. I mean, I'll say this. If I go in to talk to the city council about this, they know the minute I open my mouth where I'm coming from. But if somebody that they know that hasn't had any interest in this comes in and asks the same questions, then they start to realize that this goes beyond people that have a kind of a special commitment to it. So anyway, I just like to...
I mean, I think that's true. And, you know, I just want to say that one of the things that we shouldn't do is we should never call it CCA. Right? What does CCA mean? Right? I'm just saying, just in terms of stuff, and we shouldn't use the aggregation word, because community choice, that's something that people can really, I mean, community and choice, they understand those concepts. Aggregation is something like, I don't know what it is, from chemistry class or whatever, wherever it was that you were throwing, I mean, it's whatever. So, I mean, so we need to get away from we need to get away from the techno kind of stuff, but, you know, largely, and, you know, really get people to think democracy, democratic control. Why shouldn't we have some say about this. It's you know, shouldn't we have a say about water? Shouldn't we have a say about energy? Why should people actually don't think that water should be privatized? Why do they think that electricity should be privatized?
Yeah, really, I think it is. It's being confronted with, oh, you mean now I have to choose? And it's like this: with great power comes great responsibility, right? That's the line from Spider-Man, I think. But it's true. You're forcing people to really confront, like, huh? Okay, now I have to think about, you know, the ramifications of my choices, you know, and where my power comes from, and that's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, because it's, you know, even the renewables, there's dirty aspects to a lot of the renewables. It's not a pleasant thing to think about, you know, the communities that are living in the places where your, you know, all your resources are mined and where the electricity is generated, that you know, it's terrible stuff.
Well, you know, I find that it's a combination of sort of a human factor, or unwillingness or unease with any kind of change, number one. So PG&E, although, you know, you can not like who they are and what they've done, it's still a lot easier. You know, you don't have to think about it. You turn the lights on, they come on, and it doesn't, you know, it isn't something you're going to spend a lot of time thinking about, you know. So there's that part. And then there is all the uncertainty issues that are thrown in by those that are opposed to a CCA about the pricing, about you know, any of the other aspects of it that may have some uncertainty associated with it. You put those two things together and you actually get people that are kind of intransigent or will be concerned about what this will mean if they make the switch. And so I see it almost as kind of a human nature. It's like anybody trying to change a habit of some kind. You know, there's a natural reluctance to want to do that until you can see or understand the benefit of it. I mean, the great thing is that it'd be interesting to look at Marin Clean Energy and see how many customers have actually opted out after they were, you know, in, rather than doing the opt-out prior to the startup. You know, just in terms of
the vast majority opt out on their first bill, and our best guess is that that's people reading their bill incorrectly. That's people who get that first bill and think that that dollar amount is an additional fee as
over
opposed
and above.
to
Right. So there's an educational component, or
it's a painful educational,
but it's also the way the bill is being presented.
Yeah, right.
I mean, so that's not an accident that it looks that way to people.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, the bill could say in big letters, this is a replacement rather than an addition.
And that text is in there. I mean, I think it's a question of how far people read and how closely they look at.
But who actually designs the bill? PG&E designs.
PG&E designs the bill with oversight from the CPUC, and I think we had some input. We did have some input in that process.
So that they had to say it, but it's like the medicine label.
Right.
It's like
I mean, you can understand why people, you know, are confronted with some kind of uncertainty. I do think the comment you made early on about this growing awareness of the impacts of climate change are starting to build up enough resonance with people that those concerns about the pricing, for example, might not be as acute as they were 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, people are beginning to realize that carbon does have a price, and the price is pretty significant, you know.
Yeah.
We're kind of fortunate here in the Bay Area that we're sort of at the end of the line of, you know, a lot of these changes in climate that are affecting the East Coast, the Southeast and Southwest droughts and that kind of thing. But as Al said, I mean, it's inevitable that we are also going to begin to feel those impacts as well, whether it's in the loss of water. The report we were looking at earlier on the source of electricity generation indicates that hydropower has dropped fairly significantly. That's got to do a lot with droughts. So, you know, there is a growing sense, I think, among Americans that climate change is the real deal and that we're going to have to figure out a way to address it. And I think these issues like a CCA are the kinds of things that all of us can engage in. You know, we might not be able to force our country to sign on to the Kyoto Protocol, but we sure as hell can get the city of Berkeley to, you know, help to develop a community choice aggregation.
You know, I mean, I think, you know, if people had the picture,
choice energy.
Yeah, if people had the picture that the electric line right now is just sucking their wallet dry. I mean, this is the image that I have electricity, you know, somebody's got a wallet and they plug in the stuff and the money
It
just goes out over the line, over to PG&E, but people do not have that picture. They don't think of it that way at all, and that's been, you know, conditioned like that. So I mean, I think PG&E is actually quite vulnerable. If people had the right pictures in their mind, you know, I think we could actually get somewhere. And that's part of our campaign. I think we're going to
have to wrap up this segment. So again, I want to thank Al and Rafael for coming in tonight to talk to us about community choice aggregation. Check out the Ecology Center and our Berkeley Climate Action Coalition if you want to get involved. And thanks again for your participation tonight. Thank you and good night.